You are listening to Seniors Junction podcast. We are preventing seniors isolation, one conversation at a time. Your host today, Namrata Bagaria, and myself, Paul Merkley, co-founders of Seniors Junction. Our special guest today, Bill Dye, CEO of Care Story, and Nicole Shute. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Paul.
Please tell us about yourself and about Care Story.
Go ahead, Bill.
Me? Or okay, I saw Nicole.
Yes.
Anyways, sure. So, well, first we would like to start off by saying thank you to both of you for such an admirable project. And we think what you're doing is so important and so inspirational. We're happy to be part of it. So Care Story was born after a team of people found each other with similar experiences of loved ones in nursing homes. So Care Story is like a Facebook for seniors. It's a digital platform that tells the story of each resident and makes sure everyone assisting the resident is collaborating like frictionlessly to deliver personalized care. So our mission is aimed at providing caregivers with more support and to connect residents with and families 24/7 and defragment communications and reinstill empathy of all involved.
Yes, and I'm Nicole. I'm on the sales aspect of our project, and Care Story for me is really important because I've had a lot of loved ones who are in homes and continue to be there, and I remember with one of my aunts who were there. She had a little basket full of notes and letters that we could leave her so that she could read in between visits. and this is so important for me because yes, we can call as much as we want, but what about in between those visits? How do we, if I come across a song or a memory that I would like to share and maybe it's midnight, how do I let her know that I'm thinking about her in that moment? So it's really been a pleasure to be invited to this platform. Thank you, Bill. And I've just had the greatest time, learning about long-term care industry, head on by contacting everyone who's in there on the floor every single day and how we might be able to help a little bit if we can.
That's wonderful. And Bill, before I ask you the next question, I'm actually myself curious. What is your background and how did you stumble upon this idea? Like, I'm curious myself.
I have a interesting background. I would say I was in Toronto all the time. I had a computer engineering degree here from U of T. And then I was in programming quite a bit, so development in actually online gaming industry. Then I got my MBA from U of T Rotman as well. Then I actually went into become a project manager. And my clients was actually became like, I was in the pharmaceutical industry and managing like Fortune 500 pharma companies like Johnson Johnson, Pfizer. I was doing a lot of digital project for them. And then not until later I met Phil Black, who is actually an older gentleman who's in the health, who is well connected, who has a lot of connection in the long-term care community. I'm not sure if you heard of Baycrest, Baycrest Health Science. He has actually father-in-law there. He knows a lot of people there. Actually, we stumped up, had a conversation with the staff. They're talking about the senior profiling and they're talking about caregiver training or stuff. Then they said they're missing a tool to do that. Mm-hmm. So I was like, that seems like a very interesting project. So I actually turned around a prototype in a week. So I gave a QR code scanning, very simple app and website to them. They'll be like, wow, this is something we're looking for. This is something really amazing. That's how we started Care Story as a prototype. Then we started pilot at Baycrest and we started commercialization last October. That's how we actually started the whole story. But I think it's more like empathy because I met Phil. We had a lot of conversation. where I really cared how much he put into care of his father-in-law at Baker's. I really enjoyed the story. So basing everything, really, I would say the empathy when he sparked this project.
Thank you for sharing this. And we had chatted before a few days ago before I booked this podcast, and I appreciate what you do because towards the end of my father's life, he was isolated for 2 months in a transplant unit, and the only way I could meet him was through a screen call. And he was given a notebook where he would write what he wanted to because he could still write. He couldn't speak, or so he. And there were times where he was losing his motivation. So I would meet his healthcare providers and tell them about him so that they can relate to him, like who is he, what did he do? Because for them it was patient number so and so, in this unit so and so with this disease so and so. So definitely what you do for me, it resonates a lot because I was lucky enough to be a physician in India, and I had those ability to communicate with the doctors in a way that I could, but not everybody has that. So I think what you're doing is not just something in Canada, it's a global level a game changer in a way of quality of care. And personally, being trained a physician, I would love a product like this because, while I want to really sit and chat and get to know people if I wear the physician hat, but there's so much shortage of doctors, it's hard. No, and
Yeah,
yeah, so I just feel a lot of goodwill for what you do because I've been through that, and I know what it is like losing your parent, and especially in the last days too, that kind of, it's very traumatic. And the ones who are left behind, they have memories of those days. Like I still remember scenes from that video call, and I just wish there was something more that we could have to have made it a little better for us, so that we could have communicated a little more. We just had like 15-20 minutes, and you're saying everything you want to say in that 20 minutes,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
So it's different.
yeah, yeah.
So coming to that, isolation is something in long-term care, in terminal illness, that is obviously very obvious. That's a,
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of English is that, Paul. Obviously very obvious, but but what has been your experience with isolation, and what do you think are the pain points in long-term care based on your work?
Yeah, I think Nicole can give some perspective on this question.
Yeah, from personal experience, senior isolation is kind of a silent killer that creeps in slowly, and it hits you all at once when your day-to-day suddenly changes. So it's a lack of routine, a lack of structure, a lack of purpose, as you were discussing in episode 8. My grandfather, for example, was the sole breadwinner to a wife and 11 children. And all of a sudden he retired. His wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and unfortunately he took his own life because he was so, you know, he felt so alone and felt so isolated. And in a lot of these situations, it's internal. It's very internal, and it's very silent. And a lot of times we don't know how bad it is until we ourselves experience something like that, or it causes irreversible damage. And we see that a lot in long-term care homes especially. And you know of course we want to be able to help that, but like you said, yes, we can have phone calls with family members and relatives, but you're trying to, we can't ask these caregivers to have a video chat open 8 hours a day. You get everything that you can in 20 minutes, and then that's it. So that's what we found. It's an obvious problem, as you said, and there's a lot of different solutions to it than just one.
Mhm, mhm. Paul, what do you have to say to this? Because I know you have a lot of experience in this.
Yeah, well, it speaks to me. It speaks to me. And I guess you didn't mention, but probably know very well, if one becomes the person who has to make decisions for the other person who's there in the end of life care, like how much intervention, or when is the point where you should give up on it? That's well, I imagine everybody finds that as hard a position as I found it to be in.
Yeah.
And I know in my case, I had 5 doctors come to me and explain to me that I was making the wrong decision. I was prolonging my wife's life in a way that was painful, and well, the 5th person said cruel. And it was hard to get it through my head, because of course that's not the moment when you're being the most rational as a human
No.
being.
Yeah. It's the
So
person
I
you are.
appreciate very much your efforts. I'm wondering, you both said things that explain in some detail your vision. Is there anything else you would say about your vision? Bill, is there anything you would add about that? You've probably answered.
Yep, no, but I can elaborate more. So our vision of solving this isolation problem is to create this empathy environment and culture. So that connects everyone providing care around seniors to interact and connect more with the seniors, right? Because it's not the specific problems. There's not just one solution, as Nicole said, right? You cannot provide the one solution that fits all situations. So you need to create this environment for everybody to care about the seniors or the resident, right? Because there are a lot of cases the family may have more information than the caregivers. And a lot of the cases we hear as caregivers usually don't know the resident as a person. They don't know their life stories. A lot of homes, they sometimes will hear, oh my God, this person used to be a pilot. Oh, this person used to be a model. They never heard of that. Because there are actually a lot of cases actually in one of our clients, there's a story. There's a long-term care resident who has like dementia, who gets up at night every day, walk on the hallway to the peek through the window, look at other residents. No one understood why. Even the doctors don't know why. They cannot explain this. Not until later, they talked to the families. They told them she has been a night shift nurse for the past 30 years, right? So there's nothing you can explain these behaviors. You have to relate to their personal stories,
Yeah.
right? So that's where we see that the power of care story coming as this brings everyone around this person on the same page, right? So when you're providing care, then you can provide personalized care, right? So right now we have a lot of our customers are using care story as, some build their profiles like, I love to sleep more. When you come into the room, please knock like silently and don't wake me up. I'll get grumpy and things like that. And this can give a lot of, personalization and a lot of respect and dignity back to the seniors and residents. So that's a vision we're trying to create here, is to create this culture and this environment. Because we're not like any technical company. You are looking at one specific problem, maybe their communication. I just introduced a communication tool, then yeah, maybe you can communication better. But how does that really solve the like senior isolation problem as a whole? So this is our vision.
Yeah, and it's not like, Paul, what you were saying. It's not just empathy for the residents. It's empathy for the family members. It's empathy for even the caregivers. So the situation that you were in, Paul, it's these caregivers, these doctors, there's so much on their plate, and they see this kind of thing every single day, and they're giving you their professional opinion. But Paul, this is your whole life, and this is the person that it is your life. It's probably the hardest decision that you've ever had to make, and to be told that it was cruel, it's not empathetic in my opinion. And it's just, yes, we can understand where they're coming from, but caregivers, we need to be able to view this person as their own world as well, and just empathize with how difficult that decision may be. And it kind of all just ties all three parties together: the family, the residents, and the healthcare providers. That's, what we hope to accomplish.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you share this vision. I personally believe your vision actually goes back to the origins of how we came up to Seniors Junction. I do research in computer science as my day job. I am a health tech researcher. I'm a physician, public health, but now I'm in health tech research, and something called Health 4.0 is that what I started my research career. And a lot of what I found through podcasting, and I have another whole podcast called Health 4.0 podcast, which I don't record anymore. They're there still, but I don't record them anymore. But it was all about empathy-based product design, right? So what you're doing is basically you're giving a very fundamental element of product design. And then when you talk about value-based care, personalization, which is the coolest word that's in market, you are actually solving that. So, and by the way, my thesis has a lot of serious games for health. So yeah, we need to, like, I didn't know. See, that's why I asked you your background. We need to talk separately about gamification game elements and and it's for seniors to exercise better. How can you make them exercise? So that's what I do for my research. And of course, the startup, as you may know, right, when you do a startup, it has to be very ground up. It has to solve a problem. Even if it's not high tech, no problem, the problem should be solved. So it's very different. Like though we started with Health 4.0 as the vision, and of course empathy is the, what do you call, the core. Respect, empathy, trust. You can't have a company without that in senior care. Like, it just doesn't work. So coming to that, what were your challenges and what were the opportunities in doing a company which is based on something intangible like empathy? For most businesses, and especially for investors who don't even, like, yes, it's cool to say it, but how did you quantify? So what were your challenges? What has been your journey, and what were your opportunities?
Yeah, I'll talk about how the investor's perspective. I think
Yeah.
Nicole can talk about from client sales perspective. So from the investor's perspective, I think aging tech, we call us like aging tech. We're actually quite different from the conventional
Yeah,
healthcare. Usually when you think about healthcare, it's biotech, right?
yeah,
Or any devices or any medical related. Because during the aging tech, we're not really device or medical related. So it's actually a very small proportion. Not many investors are actually have enough conviction. They call them not enough conviction of. So they don't really have a thorough understanding of the space. They know the market is growing and people are actually aging because the aging population in the US is doubling in the next 3 decades. Know it, but they just don't understand the status quo as much. So some people know that the technologies in this space really sucks, right? Like they really the software we have, the application they have, the silo, they don't talk to each other, but they just don't know how we can make a change. Because entering this market is a little bit difficult than conventional healthcare market. Well, healthcare overall is not easy to entry, but for long-term care, it's even more difficult. From this, I think Nicole has some perspectives on this.
Yeah, some of the challenges that I've seen is that you know nursing homes, senior isolation is very important, but it tends not, at this time, it's not so much as the top one priority. Providing care is the number one priority. Yes, overcoming these challenges of senior isolation is also providing care, but we've seen how long-term care currently, it's very understaffed, it's very underfunded, there's very few resources, and a lot of these caregivers are just trying to just get everything that they can completed for everyone that they have, and it's really difficult. And it's really hard for staff to they're very reluctant to change the status quo, because what if this doesn't work? What if it's going to add more to it? It's very challenging to kind of break into that. And a lot of the times what I've noticed is, the decision makers to implement this kind of new technology, they're not necessarily there every day on the floor. So it's definitely something, a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, I mean, change management is one of the biggies. So my career in the first decade of my career was digital health, and now it's senior housing, digital transformation. And I remember, Paul, we just had exactly this conversation today morning.
We did. And
Exactly.
about,
Like we have notes
yeah,
on what we just
even to the point of the tangible and intangible
had.
questions and
Yeah.
of the resources or attention being
Yeah.
all taken by, let's say, safety and care issues now,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
something else is sort of considered, social connectedness is considered an extra.
Yeah. But it's a default,
Going-
actually.
And
Yeah.
you know, when we know that we know the risks of isolation are very great for health.
Yeah. And just from an IT perspective also, like, which will appreciate, right? One is making the correct product or correct whatever prototype, but the other is getting it implemented. And then healthcare fails a lot, not because the tech is not good. It's because probably it was made and the people who sat in the stakeholder analysis were not the people who were using it because they were too busy giving care, you know, you know. And then by the time it's rolled out, it's like, what the hell is this made? So we are very conscientious of all those things while we do our product development. I mean, and of course in ours, like we rather have an under tech product and a highly effective one, even if it's paper pen, because we want to make a difference. I'm not saying we won't go tech ways, but we want, and sometimes it's easier for them to write notes. And because I've been in the health, I've trained a lot of community health workers and onboarded people in IT systems. So so I'm using like those knowledges, like the telemedicine 1.0, now apply that in a senior isolation space. It's so you can cross apply lessons. And definitely the leadership which makes the decision to buy is not the leadership which rolls out, and it's not the day-to-day leadership which is influencing. So there's 3-4 layers of stakeholders you have to work. And
Yes.
then the family is the other stakeholder, and the person himself, herself, himself is the other stakeholder. So there are multiple stakeholders. It's a complex leadership decision, even if it's a simple product, because what is empathy, right? It's
Yeah.
so cultural, and some people have a better understanding than the others, some don't, and some have a different expectation. So I think even that sort of is not objective enough. Because
Yeah.
if you're from my culture, it's not just about, you don't say hello in India, you'll offer tea, coffee, water, you sit and chat and you go on for half an hour. You don't get cut to the chase. Usually you would have all that, and that's part of your culture of care, all that extra,
Yeah.
Yeah,
not in
exactly.
long-term care, but in other settings.
I
So
think the more or less the same. Like it's the same everywhere, especially when doing a tech like this.
yeah,
Like usually the decision maker usually is not an end user, right?
yeah,
You face a challenge of how you can persuade the decision
yeah,
makers at the same
Yeah.
time. People are gonna use it, right? Sometimes you persuade, convince like the administrators or even
yeah,
executive directors of the home or nursing homes, but will people be on board of using the system? Because we see
yeah.
a lot of cases they even purchased, they're just sitting there, not being used or utilized.
Yeah, yeah. And I keep saying, Canada doesn't have a scale problem. It has a change management overall issue in any sector, public, private, nonprofit,
Yeah. Okay,
and
they don't
that's,
have the standard process or procedures.
yeah, yeah. And not to say that people who give or work in this sector don't work. They're really passionate about what they do, right? I have never met a nurse you can't work in this sector, like Vlad said, like if you're not passionate. It's not a sector you work in to make money. For God's sake, you get a salary to pay your bills somewhat,
Yeah.
but it's a sector where you work because it's something more than it has a purpose. And
Yes.
so I think while the intentions are benevolent, the execution is not always that, right? Because it's optimization of resources. So I think those are the challenges, and we as a company, at least internally, we want to make sure we understand that before we throw products or bunch of them. I mean, of course, we need bare minimum products to call ourselves a company, but at least we are mindful. We are not going heavy on R&D and innovation in the tech space in the immediate. Like it's more these nuances, because we want the industry to understand that we want to understand them, and we fairly do understand them. It's all about trust, and trust comes with non-coercion, right? So it comes with open dialogue and non-coercion.
Yeah, and
Absolutely. We
communication.
want to be allies to the industry, and if we're selling empathy, we want to be empathetic.
Exactly. And it's not also about, so maybe Paul, I can use that tagline in this podcast and I'll quote myself later, but we've been working on what is seductive, right? When you make a game design, and I think Bill will talk motivation. Inherently, what does like they say, right? Make it addictive, but addictive is a negative word, but you make it
Yeah.
seductive. And now, what is a positive seduction? Is playful empathy. If I'm being playful and I'm letting you help you, letting your guard down, and so that's my definition of making seductive products which are game thinking oriented.
Yeah.
And because you can't gamify or put game mechanics in every little thing. It's stupid and boring. Like, it's just, don't do that. Like, whoever's listening to it, don't make products which have unnecessary points and badges and coupons and whatnot. It's just ridiculous. If you want to make it attractive to the nurses, make something which they can read enough in between going from one room to the other. That's really well thought, right? It's
Yep.
exactly 30 seconds from. So it's all about being in the shoes of the people. Even though they have to have empathy for the caregivers, you have to have empathy for the nurses.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a very like, I work in this so much with researchers and with students. So I really appreciate like what you're doing, because it takes a lot to get it right. It's very cool sounding, but it's very difficult. Like
Yeah,
motivation, because my
yeah,
thesis is on motivation, so I know that the way we say motivation is so nuanced, and there's so many theories, and there's so much. And I don't work in empathy, but I was telling Paul, the next stage of my career, I want to move on from motivation to seduction and empathy, because I feel that's a natural progression for me as a researcher. So you do things which I like.
I think you're on the right track. Yeah, you should go. Yeah, gamification is what we call gamification as well, but you don't want to gamify it so much, right? Like the kudos badges and those things. You
Yeah.
want to actually make something actually usable, tangible, and make people know by using the system it's beneficial to them. They feel a little bit sense of have this little bit sense of accomplishment. They have this sense of actually sharing information with others. And, by sharing, they can actually make an impact. That should be a source of motivation, right? Yeah, because if you gamify it too much, it
Yeah.
defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Doesn't really sound make it look professional and not in a healthcare environment. It's not suitable in healthcare.
Yeah, like exactly, like gamification is feedback, right?
Yeah,
And the whole purpose is to engage. So if you're giving feedback and engagement, even if it's a simple note, because let's say it's a note, just a note, like, here's this person's profile, patient 64 likes hockey, you put it in their format which they're comfortable, the soap format, so which a healthcare person, they would prefer that rather than something jumping out of their screen and giving a funny off,
yeah,
right? It's annoying. And if the internet is poor, and we know they have poor infrastructure in the IT side, you can't really have heavy graphic and GUI based stuff coming out of the
yeah,
products. It doesn't make sense.
yeah.
So no, this is so cool. I get to talk empathy and tech with you. I like this podcast more than any listener. You know? So what were the opportunities for you guys? Like, we heard the challenges, and what were the opportunities?
So the opportunity here is that the aging population is doubling, as I mentioned earlier, right? Doubling in the next 3 decades. So there will be more demands to address senior isolations. So there will be bigger senior funding and bigger communities and more senior focused services, right? So this is a huge opportunity for aging tech to grow. So this is the big market trend. So this is the opportunity we see here. Like, because right now I think so even the term senior isolation,
Mhm.
it's not, people don't know that, right? So even the term I think will get more attention over time. And so we're all there's, I'm not sure if you've heard of phone buddies. Like, there's already quite a volunteering services where you can actually
No.
volunteer to actually have connect students with seniors. They can talk.
It's a U of T project, right? That's what
I
it
don't
is.
know if it's UOT. I think it's a state. There's actually similar projects,
There's
but
one, a couple of them, yeah, but I've
yeah, there's a
not
couple of
heard of
them.
them.
But you see, these are awareness of senior isolation, right? Because
Yeah,
if you think 5, 10 years back, there weren't that many, but now there's more attention on senior isolation. So we do see a big opportunities in these. We will see a lot of competitors as well, but that's okay. Competitor will only make us stronger.
Yeah.
yeah. Paul, you had to say something?
I did. So it seems there's so many parallels between us in a way. I wonder what advice you would have for a new company like ours.
Cole, you want to
Well,
give some advice?
yeah, I will. I'll take it. You know, I think the most important thing is to remain open to all aspects on how you can tackle senior isolation, because it really is a journey. And just keep networking, keep having conversations. That's where it starts. Because you learn so much, you gain so much, public knowledge, not of caregivers, but of just everybody has a loved one that has aged, or needed long-term care. So just keep having these conversations. You never know what you're going to learn. Keep networking in aging tech community. Keep interviewing. Keep fighting for those who you feel who feel like there is no purpose in fighting anymore. It's not going to be easy, but I see both of your hearts are in this wholeheartedly,
Yeah,
and
we are
you know
insanely into it. So.
we need that. We need that. So, you're making a difference, and please just continue doing so. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. And Bill, what do you think? What should we do?
I'm thinking maybe you want to interview or bring some seniors who's experiencing social like senior.
Pardon me?
You should actually bring more like seniors who actually experience in senior isolations on your podcast.
Yes,
To
thank you.
to right to
Yeah,
bring that empathy and share their story with your audience.
yes, thank
So
you.
so this way people can feel more what it is, right? You're
Yeah, yeah,
talking about senior isolation, what it is. You want
yeah,
these from the people who are actually experiencing it,
thank
right?
you. We do have like a lineup, Paul. But what happens is well, so it's like we have them invited. The invitations are long time gone, but it takes a long time to get them to come to record a Zoom, to practice it, then to have someone operate it. So we are working actively. There are a couple of amazing ladies in one of the retirement facilities in Alberta. They invented a cookbook. Sorry, they wrote a cook. I'm saying invented. I'm sorry, I work too much in tech. They wrote a cookbook, invented so. And there are a couple of other ones we've reached out to, so it's all a matter of scheduling and getting it. But thank you for saying this, because we've been thinking that too. And you know Paul's nodding. Yes, yes. So I think we guys should just actually in real life meet when things open, because we have
Absolutely.
far too much in common to record on a podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's difficult because I know once you're not tech savvy and they need someone to help them set up the Zoom and everything, it's a little bit complicated. So
Yeah,
hopefully that make this not actually interview them in
yeah,
person. It'll be much easier. It's more like a conversation. Right? It's not really
yeah.
a
It's a
podcast.
conversation.
It's just
Yeah.
a conversation. Let's chat how you're
Because we
feeling.
want people to not feel alone. Because here's the thing, like one of our podcasts, Paul, do you remember which podcast episode was this? Where you've normalized, oh, this is how I feel, and this is what old age must be like, but it is not. I think it's either Charlene's or Sarah's, one of these two
I think I
podcasts.
was going to say Charlene's.
Charlene's, I think, yeah. So it's a lot of this assumption that this is how you're supposed to feel when you're old, when it's not true. And Paul and I were talking about this, and again, this goes back to our conversations with one of our other guests, about how this industry it remains exciting, because every time someone ages, it's a different generation, right? The which generation is now, the next one is different. And I worked a lot of in my career in pregnancy, in the early phase of my career. So my master's is in mother and child health and family and community health. So I've done a lot of pregnancy related app stuff and all, and that remains the same. You're gonna get pregnant, you're gonna have 9 months, you have the baby. Some parts of it is different, but that's different completely. Like it's standard, it's almost a standard. If you make a product in one geography,
Yeah.
I can say most of it you can cross apply to another one with minute variations, you know. But aging is a completely different ball game. We're talking about what does independence mean and what does connected mean. And some cultures by default are more connected, but then they're still lonely because their definition of lonely means 20 people not met me this week, versus some others loneliness is really not spoken to someone for 20 days, right? So it's such a, like it's just such a broad, so we have to, every time we work, we need to have a context. Okay, we are talking about Ontario, we're talking about within Ontario independent living, within independent living we're talking about this, like it's so nuanced. So when we work, it's so nuanced, and it's, for me it's exciting because it's all about personalization then.
Yes.
And, you know, and so that's more like using all the skills you have, but it's, then it becomes complex because then when you want to scale stuff, you know, because isolation, like people, a lot of people believe, right, like it's not like a, it's like telling all children are the same. They're not. Every student has a different learning requirement and,
Absolutely.
and a passion. And then if you say that let's put all of them in school and they learn, they won't. And the same thing, right? Every older adult has a full life of experiences, expectations, and preferences. And to sit and actually understand them or get a way to understand them and then to offer content to engage them, whether it's activity based or non-activity based, is a big job. It's not as easy as copy pasting, like, okay, here are 5 things you can do. So there's a difference between passing time, and I was telling Paul this, which is you can give something to pass your time, or they can give something which you felt like, oh, I spent good time. That's, the French word is le bonheur. So how do you feel the la joie de vivre, which is what the leisure part, and that's where we differentiate ourselves as serious leisure versus casual leisure, where you just go do something once. And yes, that's important too because those are the sparks, but that's what helps you age better, is serious leisure. And how do you then offer it when your cognitive abilities decline, when your physical abilities decline? Because because at the end of the day, all of them, no matter what ability, they all can feel. So then it goes back to product innovation. Do you do nostalgia based, feel based? So then again, which modality, right? Audio, visual, haptic, what do you put in it? So like a lot of back end tech stuff discussion happens, which is so exhilarating because I never thought like this sector could offer me so much as a tech researcher or a tech product innovator. It's so much, there's so much. Like I've never had to play with so many elements. Like it was far easier with other aging segments because usually like, oh, you say diabetes, but if you really go down to like, then go understand diabetes or whatever, something like isolation, it's not one thing, it's one label you're putting on. But because for some it's boredom, for some it's loneliness, right? For some it is no purpose. It's so different. And then if they have existing diseases or family backgrounds, the manifestation of the outcomes is different. So for me, it's like, okay, how do you chunk these people? How do you classify? And then based on baseline classification, how do you optimize delivery of services? So I really appreciate like this talk with you because I'm realizing you must have done all this back end work to come up with what you guys are doing, right?
Yeah, we did a lot of tweaks, I did a lot of highlights. We need to verify the better ideas. It's not easy
Yeah.
because we're entering a new industry. To me, it's a new industry. To fail, it's not. And then there's a lot to learn. And you have to make it right, especially when we realize a lot of technologies in this space is kind of out of date and behind. And
Yeah.
you have so many complex technologies, and you're instill like your very complex technologies on non-tech savvy people. So that's
Yes.
not right. So what our goal is, we're trying to bring a solution that has very flat learning curve. It's like you don't need to learn how to use Instagram. You don't need to learn how to use Facebook, right? It should be as easy as that. If there's any extensive training session required, we don't think it's a good solution.
Yeah. Awesome. And if people want to know more about your product and find you, how can they find you?
They can go to carestory.ca, and we're located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, or they can reach out to Nicole, like nicole.s@carestory.ca, or give her a call, like 647-243-2981.
Yeah.
Nicole's
Perfect.
happy to chat.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. This was
Thank
wonderful.
you very much. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you so much for everything. It's wonderful.